we're going to do today is have a look at some simple setups in the photo studio at MakerSpace to give you some idea how, if you've never set up an environment in a studio before, how to set up some lights and get some nice pictures. First, a couple of thanks. Thanks to Kevin and thanks to Phil for setting up the studio in the first place, and Kevin for lots of advice and help. And special thanks to Shannon, who's going to help me tonight by being the subject of the photos. So the idea here is to give you some idea just how to set it up. So initially what we'll do is just talk a little bit about the sort of lighting options you have. Grab a presentation. By the way, there's very few slides. We're not actually going to have a massive amount of slideware. I've only actually got 4 slides. And I will drag it across and so you can just see. I'm not going to do... First off, most of the studios don't have natural light. So one of the reasons I just put a slide up saying look at natural light or look at ambient light is that's what we're used to most of the time. So when we see people in the street, we see people around, we see people under natural light. And that's the sort of thing as our baseline for how we expect skin colour to be, how we expect people to look. Also, when you're looking at people, moving across, stand that way, sorry, got to be in frame. So part of what we're trying to do is, in some ways, to make sure that when we get pictures and that the skin colours, everything else looks about right, the same as it would under natural light. When we come to a real studio environment, we've got a number of choices. The most obvious thing is we can use continuous light sources. Originally, these were all essentially incandescent systems based on sort of tungsten lights. They had a number of advantages. They were bright, you could set them up fairly easy. They had a number of disadvantages. They were heavy, they produced tons of heat, and if you dimmed them, the colour balance would change. They'd go much more to the warm colours. Today they've been largely replaced by essentially LED lights, and I've got a couple of examples I can show you here. This is a typical LED light. Very bright, and the main advantage is you can change the colour balance really easily. So you can go from a cool, what is referred to by photographers as a cool white light, to a warm light. Incidentally, the way this is done is that what photographers call a cool light is actually a higher temperature light. So if you look on the back, when you actually set the temperature in Kelvin, the cool lights are actually the lower value, and the warm lights are the higher values, which is the wrong way round. So if you've got a warm light, it's at a lower temperature, and that's what you get in the evening, the sunset or the sunrise. The cool lights are the sort of midday lights, and that's at the higher temperature when the sun is directly overhead. Probably leave that and focus now on the flash systems. There's a number of different types of flash systems that are available. Both the higher powered ones are normally mains powered. We've got some examples of that here. This is a typical mains powered system. This is one of Kevin's high powered systems. Got a lot of power in it. The advantage of using a flash is the flash is actually very, very fast. It's between a 10,000th of a second and 100,000th of a second. So you've got a very, very short burst of light, and it's very, very intense. What that means is that you freeze all motion. So camera shake is frozen, and any motion of the person being photographed is also frozen. So it's a really useful, if you're taking pictures in a studio, that you won't get any problems with camera shake of that. The power of the flashes, you normally find, they've got various names. They'll normally have a number of attached to them. That gives you normally the power in watt seconds. So that would be a 800 watt second light. So you've got a very large amount of energy, about 800 joules of light going at the subject. Obviously there is no heat associated with that. For the shoots today, we will use rechargeable ones. These are lower powered, so this one is about a quarter of the power of that one. The advantage is you don't have the cables. So in a confined space like today, we've got a lot of people around, and I'm walking around, it avoids me tripping on the cables. They're more than powerful enough for use in a studio this size if we're just using standard reflectors and softboxes. The flash itself, I'll demonstrate. There are people who might be sensitive to flash photography, so I won't point it directly at people, but you'll see the. Again, very convenient. These are totally portable. You can take them with you anywhere. Batteries last about a couple of hours on normal use. So really convenient to take around with you, and they work exactly the same as all the mains powered units. In order to trigger flashes, in the past the system was you had a set of cables, and you could still use that. So the flashes like the one over there do have a sync socket, so you can put a physical cable in and trigger it using physical cables. The advantage of that is you can use it with older style cameras that didn't have electronic triggering. For today we'll be using essentially a radio control trigger. There's one set on the camera there. There are examples here where you've got a universal trigger and a universal input into the flash. So that will work on any camera. The trigger, which is sitting on the camera there, is dedicated to the camera itself. Sorry, I'm out of shot again. Apologies for being out of shot. I'm not a natural presenter, as is patently obvious. The electronic triggers themselves are a radio frequency trigger. You control them by setting them to a specific channel. That means that a number of people can have triggers running in the same environment and they won't interfere with each other. There's about 16 different channels. I've never known anyone use more than a couple of them. They'll normally set, if you come and use a studio here, they would normally preset for you. We'll set them on a single channel. In addition to that, you can actually take each of the flashes and put them into a group. Essentially what that does is it allows you to control each of the flashes independently. So every flash in group A will adopt the setting you put on that. Every flash in group B similarly. So you've got a number of groups. So in this case we can put say 4 or 5 different flashes and adjust the power of each flash independently without actually having to go up and twiddle the little knobs on the flash itself. That's an advantage, especially when the flashes are situated above your head. It saves you having to take everything down and adjust it manually. So, so essentially that's how you'd set up a flash system. If we go on, go to the next. Oh, I missed my slide, never mind. Looking at the flash itself, you'll often want to modify the flash and not use it in its native state. If I take that as an example, what you've got is a fairly narrow beam. So, again, get back into shot before I get told off again. You've got a fairly narrow beam, so that the flash itself will produce a very harsh light with lots and lots of shadow. The way you get around that is to use something like a softbox. The softbox you see there is a fairly moderate sized one. They go up to very, very large sizes. Essentially what that does is it takes the flash light coming from a narrow beam, spreads it out and gives you a very, very wide diffuse light source. And that creates a more attractive look on the person being photographed. If you actually want to modify the flash in other ways, you can do it with things like barn doors or snoots, and those will condense the flash beam so you get a very narrow beam. Say if you're doing something like illuminating the hair, or illuminating the back of the head or something like that to get a nicer image or create a highlight on the person.
That's an example of a snoot.
Yeah, that's a mini version. This again is a portable version. The flash tube sits inside, and essentially you've got a collimator. If you actually want to collimate those lights, the softbox is more, you actually put a similar collimator on the front of the softbox, and what that does is ensures the light goes parallel towards the person being photographed. So rather than spend a bit of time just talking and going through a slide thing, what I thought I'd do is actually show you some examples, take some examples and work through them, show you how we set up a couple of standard setups with light, and as I go through it I'll talk what we're actually doing, and I'll thank Shannon for being really helpful as the subject of these photos. So what I do as the first set of photos I thought I'd do is show you the sort of photos you do for something like a passport photo, photo you submit to your driving licence. Firstly, everyone does these and everyone is disappointed with how they look in their passport photo. Everyone hates how they look in their driving licence photo. Everyone hates how they look in photos they supply for work jobs or whatever. So what I thought I'd do is show you how you can come into a studio, use the benefits of doing it in a studio, and create a photo that actually looks a bit better. So that'll be the first shots we do. For this, we're going to use just a single flash unit with a softbox and set it up there. If you're taking this, you obviously have to know what. Sorry. I need a camera that follows me. I need a camera that follows me. Sorry about this. I'm obviously not used to being in front of the camera. You should do the presentation actually, because you're used to standing in front of the camera. I'm not. If you're starting off with this, you won't know exactly what the settings are on the flash gun. What I'll do towards the end of the shoot is show you how we can. And for some of the shoots we do today, I'll create a diagram to give you some starting points for what the value should be. Essentially, the way you'll see this is those will show where the softboxes and flashes are. That's the position of the camera, that's the position of the person, obviously. If we're using any reflectors or any backdrops, we'll just note what they are. Those will give you the value, tell you something about the type of camera we're using, the type of lens that's being used, and some of the settings. Obviously, if you do it, those will change. They won't be exactly the same, but it'll give you a starting point, and then you can adjust all the values, either to make it brighter, darker, change the settings very slightly, and it's a much easier way of doing it. So one of the things we do is give you some sort of sketches like that. So if you want to come and use the studio, you'll have a starting point for doing it. So I said the first shot we'll do will be this sort of portrait shot. So I'll kill that. Just a couple of things about how we're set up today. As I said, I'm using electronic trigger so that I don't have to keep moving around and touching the flash units themselves. It saves climbing about. The camera itself is tethered, which means it's connected via essentially a USB-C connector to a laptop and then onto a screen, so that as we take shots you'll be able to see what's happening and we can do it in real time. In the past, there have been people who made various comments about how effective tethering is. It used to be something you only did if you had high-end cameras, high-end systems, and essentially relatively short distances. With the advent of fibre optic technology, you now have fibre optic leads that are 9 metres long. The speeds are getting very good, so you'll get a high resolution image. These are 48 megapixel images, and they'll go up there in less than a second and a half. So it's a really quick way of being able to show pictures. We were having some discussions with Kevin earlier on, and one of the things he pointed out, that you can actually take the image once you've shown it, and you can actually show it to the person that's being photographed, and they can make some comments or understand whether they need to change the look. So if you're doing something like that, it's quite useful to be able to do that. And that's one of the things that there have been some comments about whether how you should do that, and whether having that permanently available is distracting. So probably the best way is to actually keep it out of the way, and then sort of bring it round, and then make some decision as to how you think the image looks like. So why don't we try one photo just to get going, and we'll show some of the effects you can do. Back to here again. Sound connection. Just to say, it was we didn't have much time to practice this, so what you're seeing is exactly how it would be in a real shoot, in the fact that we're going to work together. We haven't actually practiced yet, have we? No. No. It's a bit sad. So all of this is going to be in the sort of real time, rather than a sort of rehearsed session. So the first shot we'll do is just a headshot for a. I'm going to stand here, aren't I? I can stand there, okay? Right. For a headshot, what we're going to do is use an 85mm lens. The reason we use a slightly longer lens, the standard lens on the camera that people normally refer to as a standard lens, is a 50mm lens. If you're doing a headshot with a 50mm lens, you're going to have to get fairly close to the subject you're photographing. And what that tends to do is distort the facial features. Those features that are nearer the camera, because they're disproportionately nearer the camera, start to look overly large, and conversely, it makes the appearance look slightly strange. It's the sort of thing you'd see if you're standing a foot and a half away from someone and staring someone in the face. It may not be quite as attractive. So what we do, yes, people smile at that. What we do is use a slightly longer lens that allows a more natural look. Towards the end of the shoot, we'll show you some effects of how changing the type of lens will have an effect on the overall image effect. So, first thing I'll do is grab a photo. Right. So what we've done is we've taken a single photo. Hope the flash did go off there. It's gone across there, and we can now view it and drag it across. Right. This is where I kill myself and damage it. Right. One of the things which you'll see in the photo is it still has some things that you may not like. So, apologies, but it was deliberate. If you notice, by having a single flash coming from above the head, you do get quite distinct shadows under the nose, under the eyes, and that's something which you may not think is particularly attractive, and it may not be in the photo you want. So one of the ways you can change that is either you can bring the flash down, but then it tends to look more like a mugshot. Alternatively, you can actually put a reflector and bounce some light back up. And what we'll do there is use a very simple reflector. These are simple reflectors. This is a fairly small one. You can get these up to a massive size. They come with various colour options: silver, gold, white. For photographing people, the gold reflector is quite nice because it actually gives a slightly warmer tint to the thing, and it actually makes skin colour look a bit better. So I'm going to be nice and I'll show you hold the reflector in place. So what's happening now is that the bulk of the light is coming straight at the person being photographed. A proportion of it will hit the reflector and be bounced back up. And hopefully the picture will look better. So we'll try an identical picture. there you see how quickly it comes across. So actually using tethering now is quite an acceptable way of working. There we are. So you'll see the two pictures. In the second one, you've lost some of the shadowing under the eyes. Sorry, okay, stand there. You've lost some of the shadowing under the eyes. You've lost some of the shadowing under the nose. And it just makes the picture look a lot easier and much more pleasant. Rather than hold it for ages. So that's a very, very simple way of taking a shot, making it look much more appealing, and you've got a shot that you can possibly use for your passport photo, your driving license photo, whatever photo you do. And that's very easy to set up in the studio. It's just with a single light and a single reflector. Excuse me. So that was the first thing we'd like to do, is just show you that. You'll notice there I was using autofocus on the camera. The purists will tell you that you should always use everything on the camera should be set manually, and ideally that's what you'd do. Autofocus these days is pretty good for a standard shot where the subject you're photographing, you can see the face, you can see the eyes. Most of the modern cameras will handle that very well. As soon as you deviate from that, so for example, if you turn away from the camera or there's nothing distinct to focus on, autofocus tends to fail, and then you have to go over to manual focus. Again, the other side of this is, what do you do with the settings on the camera? We can talk a bit about that later, but essentially you've got, when you're using flash, the shutter speed is sufficiently long that the shutter is open for the time the flash is going to fire. So it has to be fully open for the time the flash is going to fire. So essentially a shutter speed slower than about 160th or 200th of a second will work. A lot of the cameras, as soon as you put a flash unit on there, or a flash trigger on there, will automatically default to that value or to a 60th of a second. The thing to watch is that some of the universal triggers won't interact with the cameras, and you'll have to set that shutter speed manually. So if you're using a camera that one of us has got a trigger that is designed for the camera, then that shutter speed will be set automatically. If you're using a camera that we haven't, and we use one of the universal triggers, sometimes the camera won't pick up that there's a flash attached to it, and it won't set the shutter speed, and then you just have to check one that is down to 160th or less than, or greater than that. Just a note on the environment here. At the moment we've got all the lights on. In reality, you would want to take as many of the peripheral lights off as possible. I mean, we can do that in the studio area if people are happy with that. Are people okay with that? Okay. That's the first, the nearest switch to me on there. I should take it off. What that will do is it will reduce the light from the fluorescent lights, and that tends to put a slightly greenish tinge on there. So what we can do is redo that same shot with the lights off, and you may be able to see a difference. Again, the purist approach says that you should take as many of the peripheral lights off as possible, so you probably dim the environment a bit more than that. There are difficulties with that. If you take every light off, you're going to have trouble focusing. What you can do is that most of the flash guns have what's termed a modelling light in there, which means you can switch that on, and it creates a small amount of light coming from the flash gun itself. It has a small incandescent or LED bulb in there that will throw some light onto the person so that you can actually focus. If you don't have that, most of the cameras these days have some sort of internal infrared or LED focusing mechanism on there. But again, if you're doing manual focus, you probably want to have some lighting on. Again, the purists will tell you not. That you want to take as much of the peripheral light off as you can, so that you've got complete control of the lighting environment. The other setting which you have on a camera is the aperture. The aperture of the lens is essentially how large the light gathering portion of the lens is. It's normally quoted in F numbers, and again, this is sort of the reverse of what you'd expect. The smaller the F number, the larger the portion of the lens you're using. So a large aperture would be a small F number, so something like f2, f1.8. A large F number, something like f16, is a very small portion of the lens. There is a compromise in lens design so that all lenses have some forms of aberration. That means that the lens itself will distort or essentially defocus the image. The smaller the aperture, the more you get diffraction effects. The larger the aperture, the more difficult it is to make a perfect lens. The net of that is, the more expensive the lens you buy, the better it will work at higher apertures. What we've started off here is we're doing it at a moderate aperture, about f5.6. That's a good compromise. You get really sharp focus, you'll get really sharp images, and it'll be you won't get much effect from diffraction. That probably applies to most lenses. Going to a wider aperture, so you go down to f2 or something like that, you're looking at more expensive lenses or prime lens. Why would you want to change the aperture which you're using with the camera? Has two effects. The larger the aperture you use, i.e. if you go down to something like f1.8, f2, you'll gather more light into the camera. That means that you can use a lower power flash or modify the flash in a number of ways. So if you've got a lower power flash or that, you can actually still get enough light by making the aperture larger, i.e. going to something like f2, f3.5, f4, something like that. The effect of that is also on the depth of field. So as you make the aperture larger, the depth of field becomes smaller. So if we take an image here, and we'll have a look at what the effect of that is by holding a sample in front of the person. So by making the aperture larger, you get a much narrower depth of field, so only the bits you're interested in are in focus. If you make the aperture smaller, you get a much wider depth of field, but you need to have a much brighter flash. And we can probably demonstrate that with a bunch of flowers. So if you hold a bunch of flowers ahead of you, what I will do is, if you hold it a bit further in front of you, what I'll do is focus on So what we've done there is taken a picture at a moderate aperture, and what we should see is a slight defocusing. If you notice, the face is in focus, the flowers are now out of focus. What I'll now do is go to a much wider aperture. So if we go from f5.6 down to, let's say, f2.8. So what I've done is essentially half the f number. Because the f number, the aperture, sorry, back again. What I've done is now I've halved the f number. The f number is actually calculated as the focal length the focal length divided by the aperture itself. Is that the right way around? So as you as you change the F number by a factor of 2, you actually allow 4 times as much light through into the camera itself. So what I've done now is, because I have halved the F number, I've got 4 times as much light entering the camera itself, so I have to reduce the flash by a factor of 4. So hopefully this works automatically. And that should, again, hold the flowers to the head. We will check if the exposure is about the same. Look at the image, is the flowers are more out of focus. We can go, we can do it the same way, and what I'll do now is just go the opposite way, shut the lens right down, and hopefully you'll see that everything will come in focus. Let's do a bit of playing around, again the same sort of shot. If you look there, you'll now see everything is in focus. So essentially, you can actually control. You have to keep doing this. Essentially, by controlling the aperture, you can control exactly how much of the frame you want in focus. So this is one advantage of working in a studio like this. You can actually control exactly how much of the image is in focus, so it can actually be used to make things look a much more pleasing image. What we've been doing so far is using essentially a neutral background, and that's what you use for the sort of thing we were talking about. If you're actually doing something where you're looking at creating a portrait, you actually would like to have some sort of backdrop that makes it slightly more appealing. So what we can do is show what the effect of putting a more pleasant backdrop on. So grab those, and we'll drop a backdrop down.
Can we have the lights back on?
You want the lights back on?
Yeah.
It's too dark, is it?
For the filming, yeah.
Right. Right. What we've got now is, well, it's bright, isn't it? What we've got now is a backdrop. One advantage of using a pattern backdrop like that is that if there are any shadows that are created by the light source themselves, they become much less apparent. Also, it's a much more appealing look to the behind the person being photographed. So we'll do one shot with that, so you can see that, and then make some minor adjustments to that. So again, we'll grab that. Won't bother with the reflector, just so you can see. Oh, that's good. We've got dynamic. Right. So, if you compare those two images, what you've got there is a much more pleasant image with a backdrop that looks more interesting. So far, what we've done is done a number of shots with the most simple lighting setup you can possibly have. A single light and possibly 1 or 2 reflectors. Most photographers would regard that as a fairly boring type of shot. So what we'll do now is modify it slightly, so we'll take the lighting to one side and show the effect of using more than one light, if that's okay. Right. Again, the first thing we do is move the light across. That's where I normally kill people. Not in frame, that's good. So we're going to get Sharon now to look, face that way, so she's facing the light, but with the eyes looking this way. What you'll now get is some better shadowing, and it makes the features look more interesting. It's a much more pleasant image where you're looking from one side. So again, the eyes are still looking at the camera, but you're actually illuminating from one side, and you're getting much more nicer features on the image itself. So that's a quick way of improving the image look itself, and it's a very simple thing to do with a single light source. What we can now what we can now do is look at bringing a second light source into the image itself. And here you've got a choice. You can either use another softbox to illuminate one side, or you can use a spot to actually sort of do things like illuminate the hair. And I'll try and sort that out. It should be fairly quick. In order not to have it too soft, what I'll do is remove the essentially the diffuser on the front, so you get just a bright light on the back. Switch that on. So what I'll do is start off with a relatively small amount of light coming from that second source. What you notice, it's starting to illuminate here. If you put hair slightly towards the back, what I'll do is up that a bit more so you can see the effect. So what I'll do now is increase it so you can see the effect as that increases. A bit more, so each one, what you're doing is brightening the hair up and making the background look a bit brighter. You're also getting more shadowing around the back of the face. So you're getting a more distinct look to the image. It makes it a slightly more interesting image. Find the bits. What we can do is use an even brighter spot to get a more intense light onto the person itself. Right in the right place. Redo that one. Just going to move the light a bit. Sorry, this one didn't trigger the way it should have done. Apologies for that, we had a triggering failure on that one. Rather than go through the menus, I'll just swap it around. Do it. Apologies for the delay. Things are designed to fail. Honestly, we don't normally rush this way, do we? Right. We get even closer. There is a bit of experimentation. Oh, that one did work. Apologies for the... Right. Sorry for the delay again. That probably gives you a good example of how it actually is doing it in reality. There is a bit of experimentation to get the lighting right. What you'll normally do is now play around with the values to actually get the effect you're looking for. And that's a very simple way of improving an image just by using a second light. So my bucket around there is probably a good example of how when you've created a new environment, how it sometimes takes a little while to work out exactly how to set the lights up to get the effect you want. In reality, once you've done it once, it then becomes relatively easy to reset it up and get the same shot you're looking for. Now I'm not being recorded, I can say anything, can't I? The reality is, normally we would have hoped to rehearse this. Unfortunately, at the weekend, got a call on the Saturday saying that the person I had rehearsed some of this with had got a family issue and couldn't turn up. So I had a frantic text to Shannon, who stepped in at the last moment. And
Shannon.
Sorry?
Cheers to Shannon then.
Cheers to Shannon, because there'd be nothing without this. So it was a bit of a panic on my side. I'm not sure how panicked the text was. Moderate.
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Tell you definitely needed
I could see, yeah.
someone to step in as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
So there was a bit of a panic on my side. So we didn't have a chance to rehearse any of the final setups. So the sort of mucking around you're seeing here is probably a good example of how you'd actually do it in reality. it's very unlikely that you'd actually do anything in a situation where you'd be rushing, like we're rushing at the moment. You'd normally do a bit of setting up and the rest of it. The final thing which I'll probably show you is how you combine a continuous light source with flash. The idea here is that if you're doing a photo of something like a cosplay, or you're photographing a family with children or something like that, what you want to do is have some feeling of movement as well as the photo itself. Otherwise everything looks a bit stationary. And the way you do that is, a very easy way of doing it, is to have a continuous light source and a flash. So you're getting the image is sharp, but you've got a bit of fuzziness around it, which is the movement you're seeing. So the way you do that is you manually set the camera for a relatively long exposure, something like 1 second or 1.5 seconds, and you fire the flash at the beginning of that. You've got a choice, you can fire the flash at the beginning or the end. I usually find it's easier to fire at the beginning because you know what the status is at that point. If you fire at the end, everyone's got to be in tune to get it in the right point. So what we'll do is, we'll do a cosplay thing. You've got a sword. What I'll do is, I'll say when the flash is going to go off, and you'll then move the sword around, and hopefully we'll get some effect. So, the way we'll do that is, I will get rid of the flash. We'll put a continuous light source. Again, you would in general spend a bit more time setting this up and put it like in a slightly more interesting place. Just to make it more interesting, we can put a colour filter on there so that the continuous light source gives you, so you'll see the effect of it.
Show the camera the colour.
I know, that's what I'm going to do now. So, yeah, okay. So what I've done is I've put a red filter on the continuous light source. We'll switch that on. We'll turn it up. Now, unfortunately for this, I'll have to actually dim the lights, because otherwise it will just, the peripheral lighting will swamp out that light source.
How dim?
Sorry?
How dim do you want
Is
it?
that dim
That's
enough?
dim enough, that'll be fine.
All right, I've got the other one now.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll do is, with no flash at all, I'll just see if that gives a reasonable exposure. I won't bother showing the picture, but you can see you're actually seeing the image quite clearly. Sorry. You'll see the image, but the camera isn't. You can actually see I've got about the right amount of light going in to the camera now. So you'll actually see something of the effect. Right. So now what I'll do is switch the flash back on. We'll do the same picture now. I'll do 3, 2, 1. When I say 1, just move the sword about. So 3, 2, 1. Hopefully that will have worked. So what you do is do this as so what you can see is you're seeing some of the image. Sorry, what you're seeing is some of the image from the flash and some of the image from the continuous light source. What you're doing now is work out how to edit that. So if I now show that to Shannon, what you'll see is that probably want to move the sword a bit more slowly.
Okay.
So very, very slowly. And then, because what's happening now is it's moving so fast, we're not actually seeing it much. So now, again, I do 3, 2, 1, just much, much more slowly. So you can now edit that. Right, we'll try same shot again, but this time moving the sword more slowly. So 3, 2, 1. There, so you get some sense of movement. If I now take the colour filter out, you'll see that the movement part becomes much more distinct.
So what shutter speed you got?
That was a second and a third, so just over a second. I'll drop the thing to a second. Again, we'll do a test of the light without the flash, just to see how, if that sort of works. Again, probably want to drop the, okay. Retest that. That'll probably be okay. Right. So now we'll go back to the flash. And in 3, 2, 1. We'll do it again, but this time move it a little bit more. Again. 3, 2, 1. And again, it's a bit of experimentation. Hold a bit closer to yourself, and then 3, 2, 1. Try again. Do this. 3, 2, 1. That'll do. There is a bit of experimentation when you're trying this. So again, you can get some feel for movement. It's really a bit of experimentation. It's quite difficult to get it to exactly right, but after you've done a few shots, you can actually work out how to do it. So I think I've got the values now. So we will now. I'll show you what the images look like. So there we are. So about the same amount of movement, slightly faster, and hopefully if I do that, it should be. 3, 2, 1. And 3, 2, 1. And 3, 2, 1. Okay, 3, 2, 1. I wouldn't say any of them are brilliant. But Yeah, it gives you a feel for. Does give you a feel for some sense of movement. Again, if you're doing some cosplay stuff, it takes a bit of a while to set it up. Sorry, it takes a bit of a while to set it up, but you can get some really stunning shots by using that technique. I think I've overrun, so I'll stop at this point and say, is there any questions? Give us. We'll go through them now. So we'll produce some diagrams if people want to see how to set up the studio lights in different ways, and. There's a few people here who are willing to help you if you're thinking of doing it. We can help you set up the studio. Hopefully we'll have a bit more time and I won't be quite as panicked and it'll run a bit smoother. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
So,